All right, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining our webinar this morning. Um, Quick disclaimer on my voice, I'm still dealing with a paralyzed vocal cord, so if the audio is a little off, I apologize. But a couple other housekeeping items. We are recording this. We'll send out a copy of slides and this recording to everybody that registered. If you want to share it with other people within your company or want to reference back anything, feel free, but we'll make sure you get a copy within 24 hours of the webinar. Today we're going to be talking about how to centralize waste data. I think that's one of the big parts of waste programs is centralizing the data so you can actually do something with it, analyze it, run calculations on it, report on it. So that'll be the focus of our webinar today, really looking at how Mapistry's environmental data platform, which we launched June 1st, it can be used for waste management, tracking, and ultimately reporting. Today, Courtney is again showing us exactly how to do that in the Mapistry platform. She's got a couple of really cool scenarios built out for you all to see. One, how to get data in, what you can actually do with it, how to think about organizationally, you standardize things within a company for both like profile data on waste, but also how you run calculations. So we'll jump into that in a minute, but we've got Courtney here today to show you the ins and the outs of the software. So quick high-level view of Mapistry. We've got a lot of people on these webinars around the environmental data platform, so I just want to ground it in what is Mapistry software. And our goal is to capture everything you do in an environmental program. If you've been on previous webinars, you know about our compliance calendar, our task tracking, inspections. But there's a big component around data, and that could be air data, waste data, sampling data. And that's really what we've been focused on over the past few months with our webinars, is showing you how to get the most out of the environmental data platform. Because to really actually accomplish your environmental program goals, it really needs to be in one place, and that's our goal with our software. One of the things for waste, especially for me, that I think the data platform and centralizing it matters is about midway through my civil engineering career, I got a call from a client saying, hey, we've got this TRI report. Here's this box of waste manifests. And the spreadsheet is from last year in the Fort Mars or somewhere else. We need you to drive out to our office and just physically sit in a cube to get all these records. Just like walk office door to door, like, hey, do you mind? I could use the waste manifest. I have to file this in a week. Can you give them to me? And like that, to me, getting it all digitally in one place, the records, the actual data automatically entered, being able to look it up and understand understand where to get all that info would be a totally different experience today. But I just remember like carrying the banker box of waste manifests around, like going door to door saying, do you have any more for me? Can I get some more? Where's the spreadsheet? And the answer was, well, go 3 cubicles down. It's on their desktop. You got to like find their password, log in, take the spreadsheet off the computer. And then like, so one of the things with the software is for waste is like, we can put this in one place and actually solve a lot of these challenges. As a company, our goal is to make it as easy as possible to run environmental programs so companies can make money at the end of the day and fuel and their economy and the wider economy. But there's a lot of overhead with compliance requirements. Our goal is to make it as easy as possible and give the entire company visibility into like what's going on. Are we in compliance with our legal obligations around permits? And are we efficient enough on the production, manufacturing, transportation side to make money as a business? So today's webinar, we're going to talk about a couple things. One is those common challenges, some that I've experienced of like, hey, do you have any manifests for me? And then me sitting down for 40 hours and punching in data, to actually running those reports and centralizing it and saying, how are we going to do this as a company to collect all this manifest data, Are we collecting all our waste data, recycling data for sustainability reporting in the same format from location to location, or do we have 50 different ways of doing it? And then talking about one specific like output, TRI, but the same can be applied to really any other kind of like reporting reports that you want to run or reporting requirements you have. So that's the focus for today, and we'll jump into each of those areas. So one of the big things is limited resources that we're seeing in terms of like people's time. One of the reasons I, as a consultant, got brought in is the internal staff didn't have time to go door to door to the cubicles, getting the waste manifests, to entering them in. If we can automate that, that removes the cost. That siloed data is a big challenge of like the Excel files on somebody's desktop, the waste manifest sit in a banker's box in somebody's office. I don't have visibility till the end of the year, those type of things. And ultimately, non-compliance is costly, but costly could be like an NOV if I don't have these records available. But costly is just the time chasing all this down, building the reports, running the calculations. Like that's actually the bigger cost day in, day out for companies. So one of the things is, where does the time go? Because time is expensive, whether you're paying a consultant or you're trying to do it internally. Courtney, you were a consultant too. You know how much the bills are.
Yes.
I mean, for both of us, like as a consultant company, like you have metrics. You're reporting on utilization, how many billable hours you're billing to a client, how much work you got from them, how many billable hours. So when we were consultants, like although our metrics were great because we did a lot of billable hours for clients, at least for me, it never felt great because a lot of times it was very manual work. And if I was assigning it to like a junior engineer or scientist, it wasn't like, none of us went to school for this. Like it's not solving problems. You're billing the client to do manual entry. And that's not the fun stuff. None of us got into that, even though the numbers are good. So like that's where the time goes. And I'm sure, Courtney, you've got stories on like crappy expenses for clients that like goes into this of like typing in data. How many hours does that take?
Yeah. I've had that similar experience of stacks of paper being dropped off, and we need to digitize it so we can total up how much went, how much went to the dump, how much went to recycling, and just never seemed like a good use of anybody's time or money to transcribe those paper documents.
No, and that's the cool thing is like we can now take it in a bunch of different ways, whether it's put in digitally or we're just like taking the file from the waste hauler and dragging it in, and ultimately like direct integrations. But yeah, once we get that data in, we can actually calculate the amounts. And that's the other thing is like if you're taking all the data, manually putting in a spreadsheet and then running the calcs, and then as we've talked about, like people have different asks for that data. That takes time. Maybe we're trying to meet waste reduction goals, California SB 14, or sustainability reporting. We want to bring numbers down. Or maybe it's to compare against what we're paying in disposal fees from invoices, or it could just be, are we under a certain generator status? So all those calculations and then running those reports takes a lot of time. So as a software system, what we're going to be talking about is our environmental data platform, and we're going to be talking about the data sources coming in, and then what do we do with them. And what we've broken down this webinar for all of you today is to take some of these pieces around like file upload, resource management and calculations, reporting, alerts, and broken it into different parts. So all of you can understand better what the Mapestry software system can do to tackle some of the specific challenges around waste. So first up is really tracking and reporting. At the end of the day, we want to generate a report, whether that's a sustainability report, whether it's having the inputs for TRI reporting, whether it's just internally being able to say, here's a comparison of all our sites and what they sent to the landfill versus recycling versus even reused and recycled back through. So at the end of the day, we want to look at like, where do we stand against certain limits, goals, whatever it may be, and be able to report out of that. So we could look at our generator status. And what you're seeing is a screenshot of what we'll show you more of is, are we under small quantity generator status? Are we staying under large quantity generator status? And then looking at what are we doing each month? What's the sum of our HAZ materials in a monthly? So at the end of the day, this is where we're going for a lot of waste programs. It's ultimately comparing against some sort of goal or limit and reporting out. I think the hard part is how do we get there? Because getting there is usually a data collection, aggregation, calculation problem. And we've got these different needs for different reporting programs. And teams are often, or facilities are gathering the data in different ways. Accounting might be capturing the data to compare it against invoices. You know, did we pay the bills? What are our fees? What are the prepayments? And then interpreting it. Or another team might be gathering it for sustainability reporting. If you do sustainability reporting, you know, like, hey, it's November, fill out this spreadsheet, please. And then you're scrambling to get that data. And that creates a lot of inconsistencies around the data sets and just a lot of wasted time at the end of the day. So this is pretty common. Like state of art, state of industry today is like, I've got this pile of manifests, I've got this email with some PDFs attached to it, I've got my desktop spreadsheet, I'm pulling it all into another spreadsheet. And somebody said to me a couple of weeks ago, we have spreadsheets for our spreadsheets. And like, as you see here, this isn't uncommon. It's like, here are the feeder spreadsheets for the other spreadsheet. For the spreadsheet, we're going to build a visualization from. And that's what we want to get out of, but this is the data problem today. So one of the big things is like a lot of this still lives in paper, honestly, is like carbon copies, paper, or exports from databases. So we're taking all these data sources, trying to pull them together into one actionable place that has visibility for the entire company or even just for the facility at the end of the day. So what we want to show you is a couple things. We want to show you the file upload. So if you export from your hauler disposal locations a spreadsheet, you can drag and drop that into Mapestry, and we can use our AI-assisted file upload to recognize those headers and that information, match it, and actually do the reporting. So what I'm going to do is turn it over to Courtney to show you the file upload and this reporting analytics, because really the data collection problem is one of the hardest parts to be able to do the fun stuff on reporting and limits. So with that, I'll turn it over to Courtney.
Okay, let me, there we go. Show my screen. Thank you, Ryan. And there we go. Okay, so you should all be seeing my Mapestry program here. So like Ryan was saying, you know, we really see this kind of falling into two camps here. Like either you have so many people trying to get access to your waste data and just too many people pulling different information. Nobody feels confident that they have a complete data set or an accurate data set. The other camp that we come across a lot is one person just being asked to do more. So they had their spreadsheet set up and it worked for their purposes, and now they need to provide different information. And so the solution for both of these is making everything easy to put into one place and making it, again, very easy to pull out. So the views is where information comes out. The records is where information goes in. So I'll start just real quick. I have an export here from, you know, similar to like an export from a waste hauler. It's got a bunch of information in here. What I'm going to do is use my add a log option and upload the file. So there's also the manual option, which is great if information is on paper. The upload file is great if information is in Excel or another database. So I'm going to pull this in. It's reading my spreadsheet right now. Okay, sheet one, continue. So it's asking me just to confirm if that this is my header row, because what it's going to do is it's going to use those to start matching against the data columns that I have. So yes, that's my header row. Let me see here. So now it's going to ask me to match some of these. So let me see. Nope. Hold on. I'm going to come down here. This one is my description. So then it matches my descriptions against the descriptions that I have in Mapestry. This one, it matched up. It recognized that it's my federal waste codes, state codes, source codes, management codes. So all of those fun fields from our manifest that we're going to want to reference later. Form code, amount, units. That P means pounds, so I'll set that. Some of these I might not need to pull in, so I can ignore those. The facility name, receiving facility name. So I'm pulling in the columns that I need for my purposes. Address, city.
And those descriptions are going to be standardized against what you already have in Mapestry, right? So you get naming consistency on what you're pulling in, Courtney, from that original field, right?
Right. So after I'm got everything matched up, so I think I've matched management code twice. Okay, because I do have it in there twice. So we're going to ignore this second one. So when it's matched, when everything's matched up, I can come down here, review it. Sorry, it says I have a duplicate. Okay.
That's one of the cool things is like it's actually validating the data in a bunch of different ways and saying it'll throw an error back at you of like, hey, you're using this. Are you sure you want to use it this way?
There we go.
While Courtney's doing this, and it reminds me, send your question then. So we just got somebody sending a question around like being able to track spend and like costs as well. And the answer is yes, you can pull in like if you're paying certain disposal fees or even fees to the state, you can pull that data in and be able to run some of those cost calculations in real time to understand what you're paying, where you're paying for disposal, and then potentially like what you're going to be paying, what you're going to have to do for fees. So you can pull in a bunch of different data, not only the manifest data, but additional like fee data too.
State code sources.
For all of you that have done this manually, like how many fields punched in of like data in a manifest, all that metadata. And then one of the cool things is once we get this in, what we can do with it is actually run calculations, filters, aggregations on these different fields that we're collecting. So like the waste type, we can pull in and understand, this was a bunch of different profiles of different waste types. And then we can aggregate based on that waste type. That's why it's so important to confirm all this matching, or even what facility it went to or what transporter.
Okay. So after we get all the matching done, and the nice thing is your browser cookies will start to remember how everything was matched. And so everything comes in, it's going to show you what it's about to import. and then you can continue. And are you ready to submit? Yes. So we've got all the data pulled directly into Mapestry, and then it comes in to our central database. And so I know that maybe took a few more moments than I'd like it to on a live webinar, but at the end of the day, it is still a big time saving over needing to move stuff between different spreadsheets. And again, a big time savings over just making sure everybody knows where the information is. So we're bringing it in a consistent format, like Ryan said. So, you know, we were talking about those two camps, either we're dealing with multiple people or one person's being asked to do more. And then one of the challenges that comes in is their spreadsheets and their processes are built, you know, often to do one thing. So pivoting their process to add on these extra questions around waste reduction, sustainability goals, you know, lean business practices, becomes a much bigger ask than it sounds like. You know, you say, hey, we have this waste data, let's look at it this way, but it actually becomes like a significant ask because the processes aren't set up to pull that information out in those different ways. So we're getting things in manually, so things that are being recorded on paper can be logged manually, upload files. So that was my manifest data. You know, if I bring in my, you know, if I have a data set for landfill or recycling, that can all come in the same way, and we don't need to templatize anything before it comes into Mapestry. So we're saving that time again on manipulating the spreadsheet and kind of forcing a spreadsheet to fit a database where we can just drag and drop, match it. Once the data's in, then we get to go over and play with our views. And so views is how data comes out. So we've got everything in, and now we've got those different questions that we want to answer. You know, just some examples. You know, the kind of easy one, obvious one is, you know, how am I a small quantity generator? So we can see here this facility is not meeting the threshold of a small quantity generator. One thing cool here I wanted to point out is our limits in kilograms, and we're tracking in pounds, but we're able to still do that comparison. So it's unit aware. The system, you know, you can load things in tons or pounds or grams, and it's going to be unit aware and convert the units for you. So this is just like one question we could ask all views. You know, maybe we've got a landfill reduction goal. Let me see here. Let me edit that because it's pulling. So these get built by, I have to back up, amount, run. And so if I wanted to keep my landfill amount, not filter, you know, if we started 3 years ago with 17,000 pounds going to landfill and we wanted to set a target of 10,000, you know, maybe that's our 2023 target. The yearly landfill amount, 10,000 pounds. Run, save. And so now everybody can come back to this and see how we're doing against our goal of landfill waste reduction, keeping that under 10,000 pounds. So the views lets you pull, manipulate your data in ways that are going to be meaningful to the people who are trying to get their questions answered. So other options are you can like filter out different data, set limits, do rolling calculations, and aggregate the data in different ways. So.
Yeah, and this is a good example of like, are we looking at waste reduction for cost savings? Like we just want to cut costs and like drop our annual disposal costs, set targets. But if you're publicly reporting like sustainability goals and set metrics around that in terms of how much goes to a landfill versus how much goes to recycle, that's the place to use that same core set of data and actually be able to report out on it.
So I'm going to pass it back to Ryan now to continue on with the talking about the next pieces of getting this data consistency and visibility.
So next up is around standardizing some of these, like waste profiles, how we're running these calculations. Like if we can get the data in, we can look at it from a visualization standpoint, but how do we like centrally manage it, even as a company? What we're tracking, so like those descriptions that Courtney was matching, and how do we create consistency around data logging in general? So one of the things is the concept of a resource library, and resources can be many different things. Like on the air emission side, it could be the equipment, it could be the materials. On the waste side, what we're talking about today, it could be the profiles themselves and a bunch of info that you want to store around those waste profiles, or it could be the waste streams themselves that you want to centrally set up structure around to be able to manage the data associated with it. So with that, that's the center part of this platform, this resource management calculation templates that we want to dive into next.
Yeah, so while Ryan was talking, I jumped from our sites area. So the sites, oh, show my screen. There we go. There we go. So while Ryan was talking, I jumped over, we were originally in the sites section of Mapestry, and that is where individual facilities interact with Mapestry. So now we're over on the data setup side, and this is where you lay the groundwork for all of that data consistency, and it's done in a way that is very flexible to your operations. And so the first layer of that is the resources layer, which is where you get to define your the things that you're going to track against. So with this waste example, this is maybe specific solvents, batteries, lubricants. These are the things that my facility produces that I need to track against. And this creates, this gives you that consistency where, it's gonna just take a step back. I did a project, like Ryan mentioned, I also used to be a consultant, and we had a project once where the customer just was becoming aware that many of their locations actually qualified as small quantity generators. And, we went out and we looked at like, what are the wastes these facilities are generating? And the first facility I showed up to told me like, we don't generate hazardous waste. And then 6 months later, after we gathered, all the information, rolled out some new training, people knew now specifically like what are hazardous waste. It was a totally different story when I showed up to a site and they'd say, here are the waste we're tracking. Here's my secure area for holding it until it's picked up. Here's my waste hauler. Here's my EPA ID. The whole everything changed in like 6 months with what the perception of hazardous waste was and what they were dealing with. And the real benefit is each new location they opened, they now have the packet to say, here's the waste that you're likely going to be generating, and here's what you do with them. So, some things we see here when companies come onto Mapestry is, again, that same visibility across your entire organization. It's like, oh, hold on, like, why you guys have this material or you guys have this waste, but oh no, everybody does. So there becomes this like visibility where you can start to see what's happening, maybe who's got it right, who needs some help, who needs some training. So this resource library becomes, your training document of sorts too. People are going to come in and say, okay, these are the waste streams that are common to our facility. You can, if you've got multiple business lines, you can have multiple, waste source for each business line, and then the specific business line will see that resource and know to track against it. So we're building consistency. We're giving you flexibility. What's tracked in here, you can add or take away from these columns. This becomes uniquely defined to your facility's processes. And then if you want to, further group them based on business type, maybe manufacturing has one set of waste sources and maintenance has a different set of waste sources, and you want to kind of narrow it down that way. You can do that as well. And then what gets tracked against when people are filling out those logs or uploading, that is in our logs side. So this is, me telling them what to fill out. And so this was, that waste manifest example. You can set these fields to be required. If you think they need to be required, you can leave them flexible. And then with this, you can go in and say like which sites need to be filling out this log. So just because you are tracking something, in Houston doesn't mean I'm going to track it in Barstow. So again, we're marrying consistency and flexibility into this system so that it can serve your very unique needs.
Courtney, a couple questions on what you're showing on the logging and all from the audience. One is, can you track like waste composition eventually for TRI reporting? But if I have, the question is like, can I track the lead percentage in a waste profile and use that for my TRI reporting?
So there's two ways we'd want to talk to you about how consistent that lead is. If it's fairly consistent in your waste profile. Hold on. If it's fairly consistent in your waste profile, then it would be best to put that in the resources under, define it in the resources. So if it's fairly consistent, we could define it in the resources. If it's not consistent, you can add it as a field here where you're adding the lead percentage each time a waste is recorded.
And that consistency, the consistency is key. If you're like, I know there's a lot of controversy over some TRI reporting, especially like cement concrete industry and what percentages there are. And there's been, if you want to define it a certain way and set it up for everybody to do it that way, managing it centrally is a way to do that. The other thing, Courtney, question about similar is like fees for disposal, fees for regulatory agencies. Can you talk about the flexibility of like centrally managing it versus logging?
Yeah, again, so a similar concept, it can be just it can be an additional field on your log. So each time they get a manifest or a disposal record back, as one of the fields that they are tracking along with like the amounts and the material types can be your costs. So then you can start to see, well, in this one, we've got different, transporters, and maybe we can start looking at the costs in the transporter or the cost in the receiving facility, and are there ways to optimize where we send our waste or who picks it up. So yeah, costs would be another great thing to add into the log for you to be able to track. And I know some, and then you can just pull, when we were back on views, you could pull just a run on cost or cost by facility or cost by waste type. It feels really endless what you could, how you could, again, use this to fit the goals of your facility. So this is just another example where, source or maybe customer ID, where you want to run a report at the end of the year of like, okay, which customer that we were serving generated the most waste, or which production line generated the most waste. So just other ways you can break it down would be, maybe looking at the source or the customer associated with that waste and disposal fee.
Yeah, and even if you're doing cost comparisons, like You can set up the logging centrally, so you're always capturing the disposal per ton cost every time you log data. But then each facility, each geographic area, you could run a report saying, across this facility, we dispose things in 3 different locations. How did it compare for the same waste by cost, and be able to run those reports? So using it as a comparison tool.
With that, Ryan's going to take it back over.
Yeah. So what you saw, like centralizing, standardizing templates, both from a waste library, but also like logging data, allows us to do all these cool reporting views. So 1, get the data in, 2, structure it in some way using templates and calculation logs. And now kind of the next step is going to be looking at it as for specialized reporting or running some of the stuff that we talked about build by using calculations. So if we can get the data in a very structured format, pull it from a bunch of different areas or like different times that we're submitting data, and then actually use it for reporting at the end of a year as needed, whatever it may be. So one example is TRI reporting. So one of the questions was like lead percentages. Courtney had some other like compositions in that log, in the resource library. So we can look at it for TRI reporting, but we could look at, looking at waste reduction by line, those type of things, cost comparisons. So for TRI, we're going to show that example because I know people are commonly across industries looking to do this. And if we get the data in one place, we can actually use it for regulatory reporting. So looking at what is our reportable value. So it's back in the central, we talked about resource management, but now we're going to be looking at, if we've aggregated the data, how do we run calculations from our resource library on that data for reportable values and be able to report out on that. So we'll jump back to Courtney and actually show you in the product what that looks like.
Okay. Yeah, so I showed you a little bit on the previous. In this scenario, I have an ammonia component. It's fairly consistent, so I built it into the resources, and we have this ability to run calculations between log fields. So I can run calculations utilizing log fields and resource properties and build out the equation that I need to get that final ammonia in pounds from my waste. So we can combine log fields, resource properties, and do math between those. The equation editor is it's similar to thinking about like an inline equation in Excel. And there's got a full math library in there, so you can do what you need to with it. And then at the site level, so we've built in that calculation. At the site level, back in my views, I can then pull my calculated value is now one of the options of things I can pull into my view, and then I can aggregate it by year, so I can see what is my ammonia component each year. So that's, again, we're doing that focus of everything's in one place, and then people can come use it as they need to. People can create views that are necessary to answer either the regulatory questions that they have or your internal business objectives, critical business issues. So everybody's coming to the same place because this is where all the data is.
Yeah, and Courtney, you showed earlier on like the density calculations. One of the questions we got is, if I get data coming in gallons, but I want to report in pounds, can I do that? And maybe if you can just flip back, I think you had it there for a moment on the calculation builder.
Yeah. log. Okay. Oh. Edit logs, formula field. So yeah, we've got, like a total weight, which is our amount that was recorded in pounds, and our weight from density. And then we're able to convert the density based on gallons that were recorded in density to a weight. And it's unit aware again. So like I was showing with the limits, where we could put our limit in kilograms but track our waste in pounds, it's telling me my output numbers in pounds, which is what I'd expect. So I know that my equation makes sense. This would give me, if I was putting in my equations incorrectly, I would get some errors because the units aren't making sense, which is just a really cool, like, I can show that real quick because I just think it's cool. So if I did like divide, I'm like cubic feet per pound, like that unit doesn't make sense at all. So I know my equation is wrong. I can change it back to that. It's going to say pounds. If I want to say to gallons, it's going to say these units are invalid. Gallons is not equal to pounds. So there's a bunch of like really neat built-in checks and balances in this system, which we all know is just completely lacking in Excel. There's no checks and balances in your Excel worksheet, kind of holding you accountable and making sure that your numbers make sense. So that's just one of the cool things with the formula fields, is this like built-in check around the units, so you're getting out what you expect to get out.
Cool. Thank you, Courtney. Yeah, so we talked about TRI exports, and like this also applies if you're, say, running VOCs and HAPs off the same material. Like if you know the percentages or the ratios, you could define those from the resources or even in the logs if the materials are changing, and use that same data stream in a bunch of different ways depending on how you want to report it. So I guess to sum everything up, our goals from an environmental data platform is one, just reliability of the data. As Courtney mentioned, like there's data validations in the calculations, but there's data validations on import. Get it all in one place so that like a younger version of me is not walking door to door, hunting down manifests in a banker box. And then be able to see where you're at against generator status or run reports. That's really the goal from an environmental data platform perspective. And we're trying to cut down on like the manual entry of data or the double handling of like the same piece of paper gets passed around and multiple people are putting it in spreadsheets. The spreadsheet errors, like conversion factors on like just conversion factors in general, people mess them up. You don't have traceability on where those factors are coming from. And then one of the big things is the lag time. Like a lot of people, we procrastinate, we all wait to the last minute to get stuff in. So if we're not pulling it in and there isn't a reminder to actually log or upload the data, we just wait till we have to run the report at the end of the year, and we don't really have visibility, and it's oftentimes too late to do something about it. So this is our overview for how the environmental data platform can be used specifically for waste management. As you saw, it's very flexible in terms of the data streams coming in. A few weeks ago, we did one on air emissions, but this is specifically on waste in terms of how do we get data in, how do we run those calculations, manage it centrally, and then ultimately analyze, report out, set of limits and alerts on that. So if you're already a Mapestry customer and you've got access to the data components in the like advanced or enterprise tier, feel free to reach out to customer success managers to learn more about what you can do. If you're not a Mapestry customer yet and you want to know more about applicability for your program, myself, Courtney, are happy to jump on a call, follow up with you, get into the specifics. Everyone uses it differently. Like maybe you don't do TRI reporting, but you really want to make sure you're staying under large or out of large quantity generator status, like those site-specific applicabilities. Happy to chat about that. So feel free to reach out. And then Courtney had pulled this together, and I think it's good, is some questions to ask around this, around your data program, whether using Mapestry or not, but just like who really needs access to this data, and thinking about like, are we collecting this data, but what are we doing with it? Is it just regulatory requirements? Should it be shared more widely internally with operations, with accounting? Are there internal waste reduction goals, cost reduction goals? And then how do we streamline this to make it easier? Is a system like Mapestry going to be beneficial for us to streamline it and share it more easily? Or do we only get one manifest a year and like, this isn't for us because we don't need a system, we just get a couple manifests? And then what are people pulling from? And like, how much time is it taking us to manage data? So our goal is centralize it, standardize it, and collect the data easily and integrate it, and then be able to track these trends month over month, year over year. Every year, how are we driving down waste goals? How are we increasing recycling measures? We talk about waste generally, but it could be universal waste, it could be recyclables, could be internal recycling, all of those. And then how do we actually share this data internally and externally, both reporting and for just analytics? So I guess with that, if you've got additional questions, I know we kind of integrated a bunch of questions throughout the presentation today, but if you've got follow-up items too, Courtney and I's emails are here. We're happy to follow up and answer questions, or if you have some, submit them here. So we talked about tracking spend and fees. We talked about like waste compositions. I know that question came in about like percent lead. And then how do we do conversions between gallons, like density conversions for reporting or analysis in pounds? One question is like, for customers, is this available now for rollout and use? And for any customers, you should talk to your customer success manager about rolling it out, because they've been going through, and if you've been using like the older version of like logs for any of this, they're transitioning a lot of people to this new platform, and they've got a phased rollout. So reach out to your customer success manager to find out what can be transferred over today that you might have already had existed, and then also what new functionality you want to add. One of the cool things about this is it unlocks a lot of new functionality for folks, especially in the waste department, of like, I have the manifest download from my disposal, can I drag and drop that in and run these calcs? So we can follow up separately with any kind of customers that want to get access to it. And with that, I guess looks like we've answered everybody's questions that submitted them. I really appreciate everybody for jumping on, and thanks, Courtney, for walking us through a demo.
Thanks. Happy to be here, Ryan.
Yeah. Have a great day, everyone.